Have you ever gotten a brand new sponge and then somehow it starts smelling really fast? Not weeks later, not after it looks really gross, just fast. It still looks clean, you just started using it, and yet the smell shows up quicker than what you think it should. And if you've ever had that moment where you stop and think, why is this happening already? Well, this video is for you. The first thing I want to say is this: you didn't miss a step. You didn't do anything wrong. This isn't happening because you're careless or your kitchen isn't clean enough. Most of us grow up believing that if something smells, that means that we failed to clean it properly. That belief makes sense, it just doesn't apply here. When a sponge starts smelling, most people do the same things. You rinse it really well, you squeeze out as much water as you can, maybe you even grab a brand new sponge. And when the smell still comes back, that's when it starts to feel a little frustrating because you're thinking those are the right things to do, so why didn't they work? And that's the confusing part. The problem isn't that those things were wrong, they just don't solve the part of the problem that actually causes the smell. What throws people off the most is how fast it actually happens. Dirt usually takes time, mess usually builds slowly, but smell doesn't work that way. It doesn't need things to look dirty. It doesn't need weeks of build-up. All it needs is the right conditions. And those conditions can build much faster than what people expect. That's why it feels sudden, and it also feels unfair. This happens in a lot of homes. Clean homes, organized homes, homes where people genuinely care about cleaning. This isn't a sign that something is wrong with your habits. It's a sign that sponges don't behave the way most of us assume that they do. Here's the part that most people are never told. A sponge can look completely clean on the outside and still hold on to what causes smell underneath. That's because how sponges are designed. They're meant to absorb water, they're meant to hold on to moisture. So even when you rinse a sponge, even when you squeeze it out, moisture stays trapped inside longer than what you expect. And when moisture doesn't fully leave, smell rebuilds quickly out of sight. That's why this feels confusing. You're cleaning what you can see, but the problem isn't where it looks clean. A lot of people think, but I leave my sponge out, so it should be drying, and sometimes it is. But drying isn't just about being out in the open. It's about whether air can actually move through the sponge and whether water has a way to drain out. A sponge can feel dry on the outside and still be holding on to moisture on the inside. That's why smell can come back even when it feels like you're doing everything right. This is where expectations need a small reset. With sponges, clean doesn't always mean fresh. Something can look rinsed, something can look fine, and still not be totally dry. And when something stays damp, smells tend to return faster than we expect. This doesn't mean sponges are bad, they're just misunderstood. The issue isn't the sponge itself, it's what happens between uses. Once you understand that, this stops feeling random and starts feeling predictable. Replacing a sponge can help temporarily, but if the same conditions stay the same problem usually comes back. That's why this can feel repetitive. New sponge, same smell, same confusion. It's not the age of the sponge, it's the environment it's left in. So here's what actually helps. You're not trying to clean the sponge more, you're trying to make sure that water doesn't stay trapped inside of it after you're done using it. Moisture leaves sponges best when two things can happen. When air can reach them and water can drain away. When a sponge is left sitting flat on a sink or tucked into a wet corner, moisture has nowhere to go. But when a sponge is stored upright, elevated, or in a container that allows airflow on each side, it dries out much more completely. That's why sponge holders and sink caddies help. Not because they clean the sponge, but they let the moisture leave. And when a sponge actually dries all the way through, that's when smells usually stop coming back. The easiest way to tell if a sponge is truly dry isn't by how it looks, it's how it feels. If it still feels cool or heavy, then it's probably still holding on to moisture. When it feels light and room temperature again, that's usually when the smells quit returning. And if a sponge never really reaches that point anymore, that's when replacing it actually makes sense. If a sponge smells really fast, it's usually about moisture, not effort. Now, if you want to understand how I stopped overthinking cleaning, watch here.